Hey guys, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. So I want to jump on and do a little bit of a reading here for you from the book, and I thought this was kind of interesting. Um, so what I was saying, and then again, just remember these are just like the rough draft that I'm getting, and I have to go back and review it. But basically, it says, "Thereby it is that which you are only aware of, that you are thinking of, that is or is not being one to that which is the relation or the related version of itself." Um, so the relation is of source and the related is of you and everything else in the world. To go back to that, because I've been talking about that, in the other parts of what I've been doing on clips. Whereas you are that which is being, not one to, but the being of itself in him to line, which is source, right? So you're either in a line to your false self or your true self, which is source. Thereby that which thinketh itself is thereby that which thinketh itself it is. So whatever you think you are, you are. Whatever you are thinking it is, which is the related, not the relation, right? Because the relation is of the receiving, okay? And so, because it is. And so, for it is thinking itself to be of it, not that which already exists. So, source already exists. So, there's nothing that isn't existing that isn't source. It's what we think it is that isn't, which is related, right? So, when we think it's related to something else that we are of, which is of our human self, it's a determination of who we are from that which isn't, which is source, right? Which is everything. So it's like the separation that's being created, and then the foundation of that creates it, that brings it up into our awareness from that point of view, right? And so we think that we are um, human, I think I am Laura, right? Or I think I am Tom or Betty or Sue, or I think I'm an animal, or I think I'm this and I think I'm that, right? It's the perception of who we think we are, aside of and separate from everything else, right? Which is a commonality. Excuse me. And then it says, thereby that which thinketh itself, right? So thereby your separation of form thinks it is, and so it is, only you may not be aware of it, which is the context of where you're thinking from. Thereby the commentary of being separate to that which is the unconscious mind, thereby the unconsciousness of itself in him to being a God, right? Because we're part of source, right? To that which you are not aware of, but the commonality, which is of the human, everything else that's a commonality, to that which isn't, for it is that which isn't that you are of, right? Which is the term. Now, the term is a whole different thing. It's that term like in your verbalization, but the term in like your life term. So it talks about that in different areas of the book, right? So it's of the term, right? So of your humanness. Um, and it's really windy, as you can see. Um, so I'm just trying to hold on to everything so we don't get blown away, right? Let's see. Yeah, thereby it is that which is not being a God to you, which is the commonality to that which isn't, for it is that which isn't that you are of. Thereby it is that which is not being a God to you, for you are of it, to that which is not seeing, for there is no God before you, only a middle man. Right? Thereby you are unto yourself as a God, which we will get to more in a minute, which is by our time, not yours, which is a time frame. So when they said by their time, they're not talking about our human time, right? And so it talks about these things later, but not like it says in a minute. It just being funny, right? Because on the other side there is no time. It's only in the physical form. For there is on our time unto us, just as you are, for you are of it, whereas we are not, right? They're not on time, but we are. Um, Thereby I am, and that of I am is in it to be it, which is that which is not, that which isn't. For there isn't, for that which isn't is existing at a different level, right? It's a whole different level. It's not in this space-time reality. Which is the rate of return from here to there, to have that sink in, to receive it, to think about it, to contemplate it, to have the realizations, to be in the present moment, which is the rate of return, right? To that which we have been but is no more, right? So obviously we're here to, contemplate things, see things from different perspectives, have the awareness, experience, things like that. Thereby it is that which is, when we are being in tune to that which is divine connection. Thereby you hear him, right, which is not him, H-I-M, but H-Y-M-N. You hear by him, which is sound, resonance, frequency, tunes. You hear by that, which is within him, and you hear it within yourself. You don't hear anything outside of yourself. Everything is within. Like when you're hearing things, people are speaking it, but you're hearing it inside. You're not hearing it outside of yourself. To being one to that which is your connection. So whatever we're hearing, are we hearing our mental thoughts from the human consciousness, or are we hearing thoughts of source from the higher consciousness, the higher realms? Thereby you are connected to that which is, or that which was, which is of itself being in the moment. So we're either of ourselves or of the past. The present moment is of ourselves, true in the moment, now, source. Anything prior to is of past, which is have been, for that which is when we are, whenever we're being it, right? Thereby it is that which is in him to being itself, to that which is source, for the relation or the related are in of itself being one, to that is or is not of itself, to that which is being. Meaning I am, and that of I am, right? I am, which is source, or I am of the human, is simultaneously being, which is coexisting, only you can only see it, for I am is the I am of the spring, right? So naturally, when we're in our human form or consciousness and we're being present, we don't really see source unless we know enough to see source within other things, right? Which is our own awareness to what's true or false, right? So obviously in the human form, we're not going to see source because source has no form or body, right? We do. But as in the human form, we are source, which has the body. So we see ourselves, right? Which we're connected to, but not so much as a source when we're seeing through these eyes. It's when we go into meditation, close our eyes, and we are allowing ourselves to step out of the human conscious, that we have our divine connection. We're able to connect with source, right? So then we're able to see, but we don't see through our eyes of source. We see through knowing of source. It's our divine connection, the feeling, the knowing, and then it's our true language is not what we experience in the physical form, right? Our language and our expression, when we're outside of this and when we pass over, our true language is telepathy, right? It's communication through other ways, not as we communicate in our human form, right? But they're continually happening simultaneously, even though we don't see source, right? Unless we know and we're trained and we get into that space to be divine connected, then we can see source in others and everything else that's around us. We have to be in that space. So that's where the practice of presence is helpful and comes in. And that's why people, don't think that there's a God anymore, or it doesn't exist, because they're so far disconnected from their true self and who they are in relation to, not related, that they think there isn't any, or there isn't one, or they're gone, they left us behind. You hear all these different kinds of stories, about it, but it's them actually being separate from their true self, their true knowing, right? For I am is of the I am of the spring, which is well-being, not that which isn't, for there is nothing that isn't. It is what you are seeing it as, for there is always gain in its being. To being it might not just be in the way you are seeing it, which is suffering. Okay, so definitely have to go back and make sure I rewrite that. But so basically what that's saying is there's always gain in our life experience, who we are, whatever we're doing, whoever we are, if we're a plant, animal, person, There's always gain in it because it's always evolution from where we are to where our next step is, right? So in the lineage and the line of being human, to what other form are we going to be or where we're going, there's always gain in it. There's never loss. Even though we're in a space of lack, there's never loss. Because what are we gaining from being here, right? There's no loss or lack, from anything or anywhere that you're being in life, even if it's in, not a blissful time in your life. There's always gain, and that's the way Source looks at it, right? There's never nothing that isn't for the good. And if you look at it, there's always that silver lining, what they say, in the bad situations, and that's the gain, right? So it's always, that's the way it's set up. Because even your suffering, there's good, right? And that's what you want to focus on, is what is the good out of my suffering, not the suffering. Because when you focus on the suffering, you're going into being victimhood. It's the goodness that you get out of it, right? Because that's the purpose of it, right? Nobody wants to go through it, but it's part of being in form, right? Per se. We get a lot out of it. We get knowledge, wisdom, awareness, and experience, and then we develop a lot of things like compassion, awareness, because when we've been through something, we are learning compassion for other people who are also in there. So there's a lot to gain from, all of our experiences. It's just being able to see and see through it, right? And so that's why it says here, for there's always gain in its being. It just might not be in the way you are seeing it, which is suffering, right? So anything that's not love is suffering, basically. Thereby it is all good to be of it, which is in him to source, regardless of your being to it, which is in him to self, which they explain much later. Thereby is only unto you to who you are, think you are, that you are existing as, from which is in him to, not a part of, which is separation. And then this is going into something different where it says separation you're a part of. So when really you exist as one being that is in of itself whole, for you exist as one, which is part of the being, which is both. For there is no separation going on here, just linking up. For there are only equal parts unto itself and being one to that which is, or is not recognizing itself as it is, or isn't one too. Thereby you are it, which is the source of being, which is unto itself and one to the other. Thereby it is in of itself being one to that exists, not that which doesn't. For it all exists unto itself and one, not separate from, which is the greatest creation. For you are all in of itself being one, but don't recognize itself and being one to source, which is to live in it separately. Okay? Thereby you are of one to remember itself and being one too, that lives a long life, for there is no dying in of itself being one too, that is or is not of itself. I think I'm going to leave off there, but basically, just to talk about that a little bit. So when it's saying you're a part of source. So a good way to look at that is to look at the body, right? Because everything that we are living and experience, we can relate it to the relation of source, right? There's teachings all around us, and we just have to look, right? Because when we see things, we can see it, and then we have an understanding of it. And natives used to do this, and this is how they learned, through working with, say, plants or seeds or something like that, of the earth, working with nature. You can see a lot of nature. You learn a lot about evolution and trueness, right? So look at it as we are part of source as a whole, because we are, right? Everything is like an individual piece of the whole, which is consciousness, that makes up the whole, which is a piece of you, where you are in that space and moment, that brings it all together and ties together in this big web or weave or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of different names for it, mandala. But we all have a purpose in it, and it may not be what you think it is, right? We only have so much control in life to certain things. And the part is what I'm trying to get to here is when you're a part of the whole. So the experience and bringing that into oneness here. Think of the body, right? We have all different parts of the body. We have the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the brain, the arms, the legs, right? And what does it make up? It makes up one body, right? It's all connected, right? And so that's the stream of consciousness that's going on within you that you're not even aware of, right? On many different levels, because every part of you is a consciousness in of its own self. So look at yourself as a whole, as your person, and the world like that, right? You're just like the heart to the body. You're just like the kidney to the body, but you're the person to source in the relation, not the related, right? It's when we're getting to related that we think we're the person, but we're a part of the whole, which is the whole body, which is source, right? So source is everything in creation that has created the world, the universe, everything that is on a much bigger level. It's not part of, as in this tiny little piece, but you're a tiny little piece that makes up the whole. So you are important, right? And so everything that you do matters. It fulfills the wish of the designer, the creator, which is source. And so to exist in a human body, a form of whatever form you're taking, is amazing in of itself, right? To have the form and to take it up. But the experience that you have and the knowledge and the wisdom that you bring to it, and being conscious and your intentional actions and awareness, not only do you affect yourself, but you affect everything else on a different level, because you're connected on so many different ways. And we may not even think of it, right? So if our heart isn't functioning correctly, right, what's happening to the rest of our body, right? So if we're, as a person, not functionally, effectively, as a part of being source, then what's happening to the consciousness, right, around us? So kind of related to that scenario. I don't know if that helps you put things into perspective, but basically that's what it's saying. You're part of the whole, right? It is kind of like, just remember the body. You have these little pieces of you within inside yourself, which is the whole of you, and that makes up who you are in a physical form, not your identity. But of course, you have your identity, which is a part of you, which is a person. But so you have that too. But I'm just looking at it as a scenario when you're trying to think of it. It just kind of helps bring it into perspective a little bit, because the mind is hard to wrap around, certain things when we're trying to talk about it. And so it's kind of like the linking up. You're equal parts of everything else that's whole within itself. And it goes on to say, which is two, but it's only one, right? Because there's no two of anything. And that goes on to explain it a little bit more here. And I think that's a little bit further down, but yeah, but everything is one, right? So you're either being one with yourself, which is actually separate, but it's false, or you're being one with source, right? Which is true, in the whole. So there's basically only one of everything, but it looks like it's false or true or more, because even when you're looking at, to go deeper, people talk about duality. But what is duality? It's one of the whole. It's either you are or you're not. It's you're one or other, one of this or you're one of that. You're either one of lack or one of rich, or your abundance, abundance or lack. You're either one of them, right? It's one. There's not two. It's just one going on at the time. You're either here or you're there. And even though it's duality, it's still just one. There's only just one. There's only one Laura. There's only one John. There's only one other, whatever, cat, dog. But it's, even though it's just one, we have others that look like us, but they're not us. We're still one, right? And so one is individual, divisible by, how does a book says, it's one is individual by itself, right? So you can't divide it. It is what it is. You can't, and that book talks about that more too, later on, but it's indivisible by itself. I think it's how it relates it to it. But anyway, that's in the book. Their bite is by him, which is HYMN, not him as in man. It's not gender specific, this book. So it takes that out of the equation. Has nothing to do with him or her, she or he, whatever you want to put in as identity. It's not. It is by him that you are being, not itself, for you have nothing to do with the making of the world, only to that which you do for yourself, which is in him to being that which you believe it is, for it is all for the good, not the bad. For there is no bad, only unto you to that which you make up about it, that you think it is, which is by seeing, right, by it from where it is that you are, for you are of it, which is the world, unto worlds, not the world itself. Okay, thereby you are part of it, but you are not the whole of it, which is in him, the within and without. All right, yeah, I'm going to end it there. But anyway, that's kind of just, part of it that I wanted to kind of read, because I know it helps me to put it into perspective. If you look at it as a body, like how we are, because the book talked about later down in the other writing about being a part of it. And so I was kind of still like on it, trying to figure out, what do you mean a part? Am I a part of it as part of a lesser than, a more than, a smaller than, a piece of it? Like what is a part? And so this really kind of drew that together for me. And so that was the example that was given to me when I was writing it. They were showing me to think of it as like a part of the body, as a whole, right? Because one doesn't function without the other, but it's still connected um, through the body, a different process and different intelligence, which is similar to what the world is. If you look at it on a grander scheme, of the body, how this is how it is also connected to the world and to source, as you are as a person in the temporary form, of being here in this existence. So basically, just wanted to share that. I thought that was kind of cool how they brought that to help piece it together for me. And I don't know if it'll help you, but basically that's what it's saying. And then everything coexists at the same time. We're just not aware of it. That source is here, even though source doesn't play in our role of our delusion, our illusion, it's still present, right? We're the ones that, and I talked about this before, we're the ones that leave our connection to source and have the experiences outside of our divine connection. But source is still there present, right? Source is still there, right? But we're having our own experience. So without free will, there's no intervention. And so we're allowing whatever to happen outside of our divine connection. So we're leaving, our alignment, which is love, for other things to happen along the streams of consciousness, right? From love to the lack of love, right? So it's the stream of consciousness, which I've talked about before too. But source is always there, and it's not that source doesn't do anything, or we were giving free will for a reason, right? And so that's what they say. They call it free will, right? It's choice. We've been given choice for a reason, and we get to choose, right? What we're creating, what we're experiencing, who we are, what we're doing, what we're being. And it's by choice that we get to, and I want to take that free will out of the picture, because that goes towards the religious beliefs. And so a lot of people misunderstand what that is. So choice is the word that I like to use, and this is what comes through on the book. But we've been given choice to choose our experience and who we are, right? But at the same time, it's not to say the source isn't there. It's just we're not divinely connected to source, when we're not there, right? So it's simultaneously existing. You're still source, right? It's just your mind, your concept, your perception, your reality, that you're separate and that you're not source, and you're disconnected and you're lost and you're a sinner, and whatever it goes on. Whatever the mind frame wants to teach you or tell you. But anyway, yeah, basically, simultaneously happening, you're still source, but because you're out of the consciousness of source, which is the frame of mind, you're separate, right? But there's real no separation because you are source. It's just your frame of mind, your context that you're being in. Kind of like what it was saying, it's the unconscious of itself, right? It's the commentary of being separate, right? It's the belief, your systems. Um, uh, and then basically, that's the gist of what I was going to read here on this part. If you have any questions on that, drop that below, and share anything that you might think about that or might be helpful to you. If anything like that makes sense, or if something doesn't make sense, reach out. I do coaching sessions, and you can also book a session as well. All right, and all right. Well, thanks for joining me, and I'll get back on here with another clip at another time, probably next weekend, because I'm trying to do one like every weekend on little different parts that I'm writing here, or channeling, I should say. And yeah, all right. Happy journeys. Found my little clipper.